The girl no one saw the slap echoed louder than it should have, not because of the sound, but because of what followed. Every light inside the restaurant flickered. The air grew cold, and somewhere far too close, something ancient woke up. But 30 seconds earlier, nobody had been paying attention to the girl. No one ever did. Amara had learned long ago that invisibility was safer than being seen. At 23, she owned nothing except a thin gray coat, a worn backpack, and a stubborn will to survive. The city of Nocthalo was not kind to the homeless, and especially not in winter, when icy rain turned sidewalks into mirrors of misery. Yet every night she walked exactly 12 blocks to reach the place that smelled like warmth. The Velvet. Fang, an upscale restaurant known for its crystal chandeliers, velvet chairs, and wealthy clientele who never noticed the girl wiping their tables. Technically, Amara wasn't an employee. The manager let her clean after closing in exchange for leftover food, no paperwork, no questions, no existence, and for someone hiding from her past, it was perfect. Or at least it had been. Until tonight. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses when Amara slipped quietly through the back entrance. Her shoes were damp again. She tried not to think about the blister forming on her heel. "Late," muttered Carl, the night supervisor, without looking up from his phone. "Sorry," she said softly. He shrugged. "Just don't touch the guests. Clean, then leave." That was always the rule. Be silent. Be useful. Be invisible. Amara tied her dark hair into a loose knot and picked up a cloth. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished window. Pale skin, tired amber eyes, and a thin scar near her collarbone she never explained. Most people saw weakness when they looked at her. They were wrong. Kindness is not weakness. Survival is not fragility, but the world rarely understood the difference. At 8:47 p.m., the temperature inside the restaurant dropped, not enough for humans to notice, but enough for instinct to whisper, "Predator nearby." The front doors opened. Conversation faltered. Even the pianist missed a note. 3 figures stepped inside, dressed in black, moving with unnatural grace. And then he entered, tall, impossibly still, beautiful in the way lightning is beautiful, dangerous and mesmerizing, King Lucien Valerius. Though no human in the restaurant knew his name, they only felt the pressure of his presence, the quiet command, the ancient authority. Lucien did not rule with noise, he ruled with silence. For over 4 centuries he had governed the hidden vampire dominion beneath the modern world, enforcing the oldest law: never reveal yourself to humans. The masquerade was survival, break it, and war would follow. Lucien had never broken a law, never lost control, never allowed emotion to cloud judgment, until the moment his gaze drifted, briefly, accidentally, toward the girl kneeling beside table 12. Amara. She was carefully gathering broken glass someone else had dropped. One shard sliced her finger. She didn't react, just wrapped it in a napkin and continued cleaning. Lucien frowned. Humans usually flinched, complained, demanded attention, but pain moved through her like wind through grass, acknowledged, then ignored. Strange. For reasons he did not understand, his attention lingered. His advisor leaned closer. "My king." Lucien blinked once, returning to himself. Nothing. Yet something unsettled him. A faint energy, old, almost forgotten. But before he could examine the feeling, the trouble began. "Hey, girl!" The voice cut sharply across the dining room. Amara froze. Table 7, a drunk man in an expensive suit scowled at her. "You missed a spot." She stepped forward quickly. "I'm sorry, sir." As she wiped the table, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with lazy contempt. "Homeless, aren't you?" Several guests glanced over. Amara said nothing. Silence often ended cruelty faster than arguments, but tonight, cruelty was hungry. He flicked his wrist suddenly, sending his glass crashing to the floor. Wine exploded across her shoes. clean. It properly, he snapped. A few people chuckled. Amara knelt. Her cheeks warmed, not from shame, from endurance. Then he said it. People like you shouldn't be allowed inside places like this. The words landed harder than the glass. Across the room, Lucian's fingers stilled on his crystal goblet. Something dark stirred behind his ribs. He told himself to ignore it. Human affairs were not his concern, yet he did not look away. As Amara gathered the shards, the drunk man stood abruptly, too close, too looming. "You bumped my table earlier," he accused. "I didn't." The slap came without warning, sharp, violent, final. Her head snapped sideways. The restaurant fell silent. No music, no laughter, just shock. Amara tasted blood. For a moment, the world rang, but she did not cry, did not shout, did not retaliate. She simply whispered, "I'm sorry." And that was the exact moment the Vampire King lost control. The chandelier trembled, every candle extinguished at once. A pressure rolled through the restaurant like thunder without sound. Instinct seized every vampire present. They lowered their heads immediately. Submission, fear, recognition. Lucian was already standing. No one saw him move. 1 second he was across the room. The next, he was there. Between the man and the girl, his eyes glowed faintly crimson. "Who," he asked softly, "gave you permission to touch what is under my protection?" The drunk man scoffed. "Back off. This doesn't concern you." Lucian tilted his head. For the first time in 200 years, he felt rage. Ancient, royal, unforgiving. "You struck her," Lucian said. Not a question, a verdict. So what? That was his final mistake. The windows shattered outward. Every glass burst simultaneously. Guests screamed. Lucian's voice dropped into something inhuman. "One slap," he said quietly, "earns one mercy." The man's bravado collapsed. What are you?" Lucian ignored the question. Instead, he removed his coat and draped it gently around Amara's shoulders. His touch was impossibly careful, as if she were made of light. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. Their eyes met, and time paused. Something passed between them. Recognition without memory, as if their souls had once known each other. Lucian felt it. Impossible. Dangerous. Irreversible. He straightened slowly, returning his attention to the trembling attacker. "Leave," the king commanded. The man ran. He didn't even remember deciding to. When the door slammed shut, silence remained. Lucien turned back to the girl. "What is your name?" "Amara." The word lingered in his mind. Warm, alive, human, too human. Yet he could not ignore the certainty forming deep inside him. This girl was about to change everything. And for the first time in centuries, the Vampire King was afraid. Not of enemies, not of war, but of what his heart, long believed dead, had just done. The protection. She never asked. For the moment the last shard of glass stopped skittering across the marble floor, everyone in the restaurant understood something without being told. Tonight had not been normal. Tonight, power had revealed itself. Not fully, not openly, but enough to terrify every creature in the room, human or otherwise. And at the center of it all stood a homeless girl wrapped in the coat of a king. Amara had never worn anything so expensive in her life. She could feel it immediately. The weight of the fabric, the faint scent of midnight and cedar, the unnatural warmth spreading through her shoulders despite the cold air rushing in through the broken windows. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Her voice trembled only slightly. The man before her did not answer right away. Lucien studied her face with unsettling intensity. Not in the way men usually looked at her. Not with pity, hunger, or dismissal. He looked at her, like a puzzle carved thousands of years ago. "You were struck," he finally said. "As long as I stand here, that becomes my concern." It was not a comforting sentence. It was a royal one. Final. Unarguable. Around them, the restaurant staff whispered nervously while guests hurried toward the exit. The manager bowed repeatedly toward Lucian without understanding why his body insisted on submission. Only the vampires in the room truly knew, and they dared not speak his name aloud. Amara tried to remove the coat. Lucian stopped her with a single glance. "Keep it. I'll return it after it's cleaned," she said quickly. "It is not alone." The words confused her. Before she could respond, a tall man approached Lucian and bent slightly at the waist. "My king," he murmured under his breath. "No witnesses recorded the incident. We disrupted the security feeds." Lucian did not. "Look at him. Good. Clear the human's memory of anything unnatural." Amara blinked. "Memory?" The tall man froze. Lucian spoke calmly. "My staff will handle the damage." "Staff?" Something about that word unsettled her. Who was this man? He didn't feel like an ordinary stranger. He felt dangerous. Ancient, controlled power hummed beneath his stillness like a sleeping volcano. Amara suddenly remembered the way the air had changed when he stood, the way the lights died, the way fear had spread without explanation. Her instincts whispered a single warning. He is not human. Yet strangely, she did not feel afraid. "What were you doing here alone?" Lucian asked. "I work here. You are not on their employee registry." She stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know many things." That was not an answer, but something in his tone told her pressing further would be useless. She hesitated, then admitted softly, "They let me clean after hours, so I can eat." Lucian's expression changed, barely, but the temperature around him dropped another degree. "Hunger," he repeated quietly. The word sounded personal, offensive, as if the concept itself insulted him. "When did you last sleep? Indoors?" She gave a small shrug. "A few nights ago." Silence fell. Heavy, measured. The king turned to his advisor. "Find the owner of this establishment." "Yes, sire." "Buy it." The advisor did not even blink. At once. Amara stared. "Buy the restaurant?" Lucian looked almost puzzled by her surprise. "It has proven incapable of protecting someone under my gaze. You can't just purchase a building because someone slapped me. I can." And somehow, she believed him. Outside, thunder rolled. Across the distant sky, rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady. Lucian glanced toward the shattered entrance. "You cannot return to the streets tonight." "I've survived worse." That was not a suggestion. His voice softened slightly. It was a decision. Amara crossed her arms. "I don't need rescuing." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval? Perhaps. "Need rarely consults pride," he said, "but survival often requires accepting shelter." She hesitated. Every lesson life had taught her screamed, "Do not trust powerful strangers." Yet another voice, quieter, deeper, asked, "Why does he feel safe?" Before she could answer herself, a cold wind swept through the broken doorway. Her body shivered violently, Lucian noticed. Without asking permission, he removed a glove and gently took her injured hand. His skin was cool. Not dead. Just different. He examined the cut on her finger. "It will scar. I have plenty already." His thumb hovered near the mark on her collarbone. He did not touch it, but his gaze darkened. "Who hurt you?" he asked. "A long time ago." That is not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. For a moment, tension sparked between them. Then, unexpectedly, Lucian gave the faintest hint of a smile. You do not fear me. Should I? Yes. She considered that, then shook her head. No. Something inside the ancient king shifted. For 400 years, humans had feared him instinctively. Yet this fragile girl met his gaze without trembling. Curious. Very curious. A black car appeared at the curb moments later. Silent, elegant, waiting. My residence is nearby, Lucian said. You will stay there until we determine a safer arrangement. Amara stepped back. Absolutely not. The refusal surprised even her. Lucian raised an eyebrow. You would prefer the alley? I prefer choices. The king studied her again, and for the first time in centuries, he adjusted his approach. You have one, he said calmly. Freeze outside, or accept temporary shelter. She sighed. You are very difficult. I have been told so. After a long pause, she nodded. Just for tonight. The ride through the city felt unreal. Raindrops streaked across tinted windows while silence wrapped the car like velvet. Amara watched neon lights blur past. You still haven't told me your name, she said. Lucian. The name sent an odd warmth through her chest. Old, elegant, dangerous. Are you some kind of billionaire? Something like that. Not exactly a lie, not remotely the truth. Minutes later, the car turned toward iron gates taller than any building she had entered before. They opened without a sound. Beyond them stood a mansion carved from obsidian stone, towering. Regal, illuminated by silver lanterns, Amara whispered before she could stop herself. This is a palace. It is merely where I sleep. She almost laughed, but the gates closed behind them with a final clang that made her stomach tighten. For the first time that night, nervousness crept in. Inside, warmth embraced her immediately. Fireplaces glowed. Marble floors reflected golden light. Somewhere distant, a piano played itself. She turned slowly. This place is bigger than the entire block I used to live on. We'll have a room prepared, Lucian said, and food. Her stomach betrayed her with a small sound. He pretended not to hear. A woman approached and bowed. Your Majesty. Amara froze. Your Majesty. The words echoed inside her skull. She looked at Lucian, then back at the woman, then at him again. Understanding dawned. Slow. Impossible. Terrifying. Your royalty? Lucian held her gaze. Yes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What kind? For a fraction of a second, the ancient predator considered lying, but something about her demanded truth. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet weight of centuries. I am the Vampire King. The world stopped. Amara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every childhood legend, every nightmare story, every warning. Real, standing inches away. Yet, he had wrapped her in his coat, protected her, looked at her like she mattered. She should have been terrified. Instead, she asked the question that changed everything. If you're a king, why save someone like me? Lucian stepped closer, not threatening, not forceful, just certain. Because power means nothing, he said quietly, if it does not rise when the innocent are harmed. Something inside her chest broke open. No one had ever called her innocent. Before, no one had ever defended her. And in that moment, the homeless girl realized something extraordinary. The most feared creature in the hidden world was looking at her like she was precious. Neither of them noticed the shadow watching from the upper balcony. Red eyes gleamed in the darkness. Ancient. Scheming. Patient. A whisper slid into the night. So, the king has found his weakness. And, far below, destiny began tightening its threads around them both. The girl the vampires could not read. Mara did not sleep that night, not because the bed was unfamiliar, though it was softer than anything she had ever touched. Not because the room was enormous, large enough to fit the entire shelter she once stayed in. She couldn't sleep because of one impossible truth repeating in her mind. The Vampire King had brought her into his palace, and she was still alive. Dawn approached, though the sun itself remained hidden behind thick winter clouds. The palace was unnaturally quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint crackle of distant fireplaces. Amara sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in a tall silver mirror. She barely recognized the girl looking back. Clean, wrapped in borrowed silk, her cheeks still faintly bruised, a reminder that last night had been real. A soft knock came at the door. She tensed. "Enter," she said carefully. The same elegant woman from earlier stepped inside carrying a tray. His Majesty instructed that you eat. The smell alone made Amara dizzy. Warm bread, honey, fresh fruit. She hesitated. "Is it allowed?" The woman blinked. "My lady, if the king commands it, it is law." "My lady." No one had ever called her that. She ate slowly at first. Then, hunger took over. The woman watched quietly before speaking again. "The court is already whispering." Amara's hands paused. "About me?" "Yes." "Why?" The woman hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "Because in 400 years, the king has never brought a human here." A chill slid down Amara's spine. Elsewhere in the palace, tension simmered beneath perfect stillness. Inside a vast chamber lined with black marble pillars, Lucian stood before a semicircle of ancient vampires, the High Court. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, creatures who had survived empires, wars, and revolutions. Power clung to them like perfume. At the center sat Lord Varkros, older than most cities, cruel enough to enjoy it. "You." "Shattered windows across an entire district," Varkros said calmly, "all to defend a human girl." Lucian's expression did not change. "She was assaulted." "And since when?" Another elder sneered. "Does a king involve himself in human disputes?" "When justice demands it." Murmurs rippled. Varkros leaned forward. "You are changing, Lucian." "I am evolving." "You are weakening." The word hung in the chamber like smoke. Lucian's eyes darkened slightly. "Choose your next sentence with care." The elder smiled thinly. "Very well. Then answer this. Why is the girl still alive?" Silence. Because every vampire in that room knew the law. Humans who witnessed supernatural power were usually erased. Memories wiped, sometimes permanently. Yet the girl remained, protected, inside the royal palace. Lucian spoke slowly. "She is under my personal protection." "That," Varkros said softly, "is exactly what concerns us." Back in her room, Amara wandered toward the tall window. Snow had begun falling. The palace gardens looked endless, frozen statues and silver trees stretching toward mist. For the first time in years, she felt warm, safe. A dangerous feeling. She pressed her palm against the glass, and that was when she sensed it, a presence behind her. She turned sharply. Lucian stood near the doorway, silent as moonlight. She hadn't heard him enter. "You move like a ghost," she said. "I move like a predator." Oddly, she smiled. "You watched me sleep? I confirmed you were breathing. That is both comforting and terrifying." His gaze flickered briefly toward the fading bruise on her cheek. "It will heal by tomorrow." "You sound certain." "I am." A pause. Then, "You should not stay here long," he added. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. "Oh. The court is already restless. My enemies will look for leverage. And I am leverage? You are visible." Something about the way he said it made her pulse quicken. Visible. As if he had truly seen her from the first moment, Lucian studied her quietly. There was something deeply unsettling about this girl. Not her appearance, not her behavior, her presence. Vampires sensed life differently than humans, like heat signatures in darkness. Yet when he focused on Amara, her energy shimmered strangely, ancient, familiar, impossible. "How old are you?" he asked suddenly. 23. "Where were you born?" She stiffened. "Nowhere important." "Everyone is born somewhere." Her eyes dropped. "I don't remember my parents. Truth, but incomplete." Lucien sensed it instantly. Before he could press further, the doors burst open. A guard stepped inside, visibly shaken. "My king, forgive the intrusion." Lucien turned. "What is it?" "There has been an incident." Minutes later, they stood in the palace courtyard. Snow crunched beneath their feet. At the iron gates lay the body of a vampire guard. Ash gray, lifeless, drained. Lucian's voice dropped into something lethal. "Who did this?" "No signs of struggle," the captain said. "It was instantaneous." Amara stared, fear coiled in her stomach. "You said vampires couldn't be killed easily." "They cannot," Lucian replied quietly. "Unless something very powerful hunts them." Then he noticed it, a symbol carved into the frost beside the body. 3 intersecting lines, ancient, forbidden. Lucien's entire posture changed. "Impossible." "What is it?" Amara whispered. He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried the weight of forgotten nightmares. An order that was wiped out centuries ago. The Blood Sovereign. The name seemed to darken. The air itself. "They slaughtered both humans and vampires," he continued. "They believed coexistence was weakness." Amara swallowed. "Are they back?" Lucian's jaw tightened. "If they are, you are no longer merely a risk to court politics. You are standing at the center of a coming war." Her breath caught. "Why me?" Because at that exact moment, Lucian realized something terrifying. The dead guard had been posted outside, her wing, not the treasury, not the throne hall. Her. Someone had come searching. From the shadows of the balcony above, Varkros watched with faint amusement. The trap was tightening perfectly, because fear made kings reckless, and reckless kings were easier to destroy. That night, a storm rolled across the sky. Wind howled against the palace towers. Inside the library, Lucian pored over ancient records while Amara sat nearby, wrapped in a thick blanket. "You should rest," he said without looking up. "You say that a lot for someone who never sleeps." "I rest." "That is not the same." A faint smirk touched his lips. She studied him for a long moment before asking quietly, "Why do I feel like my life started the moment you walked into that restaurant?" Lucian stilled. Because he had been wondering the same thing. Before he could respond, Amara gasped softly. Pain shot through her palm. She looked down. A thin line of blood welled across her skin, yet she hadn't touched anything sharp. The droplets fell onto the marble floor. Lucian moved instantly, but he stopped short. The blood was glowing, faint, silver. Every instinct inside the ancient king roared at once. Not human, not vampire, something far older. He lifted his gaze slowly. "Amara." Her voice trembled. "What's happening to me?" Lucian answered with quiet horror. "I was wrong. You are not a weakness." Outside, thunder split the sky, and the king finished the sentence that would change both their destinies forever. "You are the reason they're coming. The blood that should not exist." The glowing stopped as suddenly as it began. Within seconds, the silver light faded from Amara's blood, leaving only a thin red line across her palm, as if nothing unnatural had happened. But the silence that followed felt enormous. Lucien did not move, did not blink, For the first time in centuries, the vampire king looked shaken. Amara stared at her hand. "Tell me that was some kind of reflection," she whispered. Lucien's voice came low and steady, the tone he used when the truth was too dangerous to soften. There are only 3 recorded bloodlines in history whose blood carried light. Her throat tightened. And they were all believed extinct. The storm outside intensified, wind striking the palace windows like thrown gravel. Amara tried to laugh, but the sound collapsed halfway. "You're saying my blood glows?" I'm saying," Lucien replied carefully, "that something inside you should not exist in this century." Fear crept into her chest, slow and cold. "I'm just a girl who slept in alleys." "No," he said quietly. "You are a mystery someone was willing to kill for." Her eyes lifted sharply. "The guard?" "Yes." "He wasn't random," Lucien continued. "He was placed outside your corridor. Whoever did this was searching for something." "For me." Lucien did not deny it. He stepped closer. "Has anything like this ever happened before? Cuts healing quickly, strange illnesses, people reacting to you?" Amara hesitated. Fragments of memory flickered. "I don't get sick often. That alone is unusual. And when I was little," she continued slowly, "there was a fire in the shelter where I lived." Lucien's gaze sharpened. "Go on." "Everyone said I should have died from the smoke. But you didn't." "I woke up outside," she whispered. Not even coughing. Lucien felt an ancient unease coil inside him. Long ago, stories had circulated among the oldest vampires, stories of a forgotten lineage known as the Luminara, children born with blood touched by celestial energy, neither human nor vampire. Something balanced between life and eternity. Their blood was said to heal, to strengthen, to awaken dormant power, and most dangerously, to make any creature nearly unstoppable, which was exactly why they had been hunted to extinction, or so history claimed. Lucien exhaled slowly. "Amara, from this moment forward, you will not walk anywhere alone." Her brows pulled together. "You're assigning guards now?" "I am assigning survival." Before she could respond, the library doors opened sharply. Captain Elric entered, tension carved into every line of his face. "My king, the court demands your presence immediately." Lucien didn't move. "On what grounds?" "They claim the palace is no longer secure." A beat of silence. "Then, they are requesting the girl be surrendered into council custody for examination." The word echoed. Examination. Amara felt her stomach drop. Lucien's eyes turned lethal. "No." "My king," Elric said carefully, "refusing the court could fracture the alliance. They may fracture whatever they please." His voice was ice. "The girl remains under my protection." Elric hesitated. "There is more. Lord Varkros is already gathering support. Some elders believe harboring her is an act of treason." Amara's pulse pounded. "You're risking your throne. For me." Lucien turned toward her, and for a moment the king vanished, leaving only the man beneath the crown. "I knew the risk the moment I placed my coat on your shoulders." Something warm and terrifying spread through her chest. No one had ever chosen her before. Not like this. Not against the world. Across the palace, shadows shifted. Lord Varkros stood before a circle of ancient vampires, his thin smile barely visible in candlelight. "The king grows sentimental," he murmured. "Sentimental rulers fall." An elder tilted her head. "You are certain about the girl's blood?" "I saw the glow myself." Excitement flickered across immortal faces. "If she is truly Luminara," one whispered, "her blood could make us invincible." Another added darkly, "Or destroy the king if he refuses to yield her." Varkros folded his hands. "Prepare the chamber." Tonight, we begin the end of Lucien Valerius. Unaware of the conspiracy tightening around them, Amara stood near, the massive balcony doors watching lightning fracture the sky. "This is my fault," she said softly. Lucian stepped beside her. "Stop. If I had never walked into that restaurant, they would have found you eventually." His tone softened. "Power does not remain hidden forever." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't want people dying because of me." A long silence passed before Lucienne spoke again. "Do you know why I became king?" She shook her head. "Because the old rulers believed fear was the only path to order." "And you disagreed?" "I believed restraint required greater strength than cruelty." He looked down at her then. "And yet, the moment you were struck, I nearly tore a man apart." Amara's breath caught. "Why?" The question lingered between them, fragile and dangerous. Lucienne answered with quiet honesty, "I do not know." But that was not entirely true. Somewhere deep inside, he was beginning to understand. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the palace. Lily. Chandeliers rattled, guards shouted in distant corridors. Lucien's head snapped toward the doors. "Stay behind me." The balcony exploded inward. Glass scattered like frozen rain. 3 figures stepped through the storm. Vampires. But wrong. Their eyes burned pitch black, their movements jerky, corrupted. "Elric!" Lucian thundered. "Blood sovereign assassins!" the captain shouted from the hall. Steel clashed. Screams echoed. The war had arrived early. One attacker lunged toward Amara with impossible speed. Lucian intercepted him mid-air. The impact cracked the marble floor. For the first time, Amara saw the Vampire King fight without restraint. He moved like living lightning, every strike precise, every motion lethal. Within seconds, 2 assassins lay motionless, but the third smiled through broken fangs. "You cannot protect her, King." "Her blood belongs to the New Age." Lucian's eyes blazed crimson. "Tell your masters this." His voice dropped into something ancient and terrifying. "Touch her again, and I will erase your entire order from history." The assassin laughed, weakly. "It has already begun." Then he dissolved into ash. Silence crashed down. Amara's legs nearly gave out. Lucienne caught her before she fell. "You're safe," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Now that her existence was confirmed, every monster in the hidden world would come searching. She looked up at him, shaken. "Why do I feel like my life is no longer mine?" Lucian brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so gentle it contrasted painfully with the destruction around them. "Because destiny has stepped out of the shadows." Thunder rolled again. Amara searched his eyes. "Tell me the truth. If the court forces you to choose..." A pause. The storm seemed to hold its breath. "Your crown. Or me." Lucian did not hesitate. "I would let the crown burn." Her heart stumbled. "And if the world turns against you, then the world will learn why vampires once feared their own king." For the first time that night, Amara understood something profound. The cold, untouchable ruler everyone feared was already crossing lines no king should cross. For her. And somewhere deep within Lucienne, a realization settled with terrifying clarity. This was no longer protection. This was something far more dangerous. Something that could start wars. Because the Vampire King was falling in love. And love had always been the one force powerful enough to destroy immortals. The restaurant no longer sounded like a place meant for laughter or music. It sounded like a battlefield waiting for the first strike. Broken glass crunched beneath heavy boots as the Vampire King stepped forward. Every movement was slow, controlled, terrifying. Across the room, the men who had dared to touch his queen tried to stand their ground, but fear betrayed them. One dropped his knife. Another couldn't stop his hands from shaking, and in the center of it all stood Elena, pale but unbroken. "Leave," she whispered weakly. The king didn't even look back. "They hurt you," he said quietly. "There is no leaving." The air grew cold, unnaturally cold. Candles flickered out one by one as shadows stretched along the walls like living things. One of the attackers shouted, trying to sound brave. "She's just a woman. Why would a king risk war for one?" He never finished. The vampire king moved faster than sight itself. A gust of wind slammed through the restaurant, and suddenly the man was pinned against the wall, lifted inches off the floor. "You still don't understand," the king said, eyes glowing like molten silver. "She is not just a woman. She is my eternity." Silence. Even the city outside seemed to pause. The leader of the attackers staggered backward. "If you kill us, the council will come for you." For the first time, the king smiled. "Let them come." But then, a faint sound. Elena collapsed. In less than a heartbeat, he was beside her, catching her before she touched the ground. The rage in his eyes shattered into something far more frightening. Fear. "Stay with me," he whispered, pressing, his forehead to hers. Her pulse was weakening. The blade they used wasn't ordinary. Poison. Ancient. Made to kill immortals. For the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt helpless. "No." His voice cracked, a sound no one had ever heard before. "You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not ever." The room trembled as power surged from him, windows rattling under the force of his fury. He turned toward the attackers, his voice no longer human. "If she dies, there will be no sunrise for this world." One survivor fell to his knees. "There is a cure," he stammered, "hidden beneath the old cathedral, but it's guarded. No one returns from there." The king gently lifted Elena into his arms. "Prepare my carriage," he commanded his guards. A storm gathered above the city as he stepped outside, cloak whipping violently in the wind. Tonight was no longer about revenge. It was about defying death itself. Beneath the cathedral, the underground chamber smelled of stone and forgotten centuries. Creatures older than memory stirred in the darkness. When the final guardian rose, a massive, winged horror, even the king was forced back, but he did not retreat. "For her," he growled. Steel clashed, shadows exploded, the ground split. Wounded, bleeding yet unstoppable, the vampire king drove his blade through the monster's heart. At the altar behind it sat a single crystal vial, glowing softly. Hope. The longest moment, back at the castle, he poured the cure between Elena's lips. Nothing happened. 1 second. 2. Then, she gasped. Color returned to her cheeks as her eyes slowly opened. The king froze as if afraid the moment would shatter. "Elena." A faint smile touched her lips. "You came back. I always will." He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a gentleness that contrasted the destruction he had unleashed hours before. And for the first time, that night, the storm outside began to calm. But peace never lasts. Far away, within a chamber of black marble, the vampire council watched the burning remains of the restaurant through a pool of dark water. "The king has broken the ancient law," one hissed. "He chose love over secrecy," another said. Final voice echoed through the chamber. "Then we remind him why kings are not allowed to love. War was coming." On a balcony overlooking the sleeping kingdom, Elena rested against his chest. "Was it worth it?" she asked softly. The vampire king looked at the horizon. Armies would rise. Blood would fall. The world might change forever because of what he had done tonight. He tightened his hold on her. "You are the only crown I will ever kneel for." As the first light of dawn touched the sky, the king who had once ruled with fear finally understood something stronger than power. Love was the one force even immortals could not conquer, and anyone who dared threaten it would face a king with nothing left to lose.